Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we explore, is consciousness just a byproduct of entropy? Look around you. Everything you see, everything you touch, and everything you remember is in a state of slow, irreversible decay. We live in a cosmos that is fundamentally hostile to permanence, a universe that ruthlessly demands the breaking down of order. But this inescapable reality forces a terrifying, existential paradox to the surface. If the absolute rule of the universe is to destroy structure and eliminate complexity, then why do we exist? Why did the cosmos bother to forge the staggering, intricate architecture of the human brain? We are about to confront the deeply unsettling possibility that your thoughts, your memories, and your very awareness are not miraculous rebellions against cosmic decay, but rather the most efficient tools the universe has ever created to accelerate its own inevitable demise. There is a chilling, absolute certainty woven into the very fabric of existence, a silent law that governs every single particle in the cosmos. It is the certainty of degradation. Nothing escapes it. We see the symptoms of this underlying physical reality in our everyday lives, though we rarely pause to consider the vast, terrifying machinery behind them. We watch iron slowly succumb to the damp air, blooming into brittle, orange rust. We watch towering, jagged mountain ranges, made of the hardest granite on Earth, be relentlessly ground down into fine, featureless dust by the patient friction of wind and rain. We watch our own bodies, these magnificent, highly ordered biological vessels, gradually accumulate cellular errors, losing their elasticity, their strength, and their vitality as we age. And if we lift our eyes from the earth and peer into the freezing depths of the night sky, we find that the exact same grim reality holds true for the stars. Those colossal spheres of roaring nuclear fire, burning against the absolute zero of the void, are not eternal. They are finite engines. They are furiously chewing through their hydrogen fuel, fighting a desperate, losing battle against the crushing, inward pull of their own gravity. Eventually, the fuel will run out. The fires will choke. The stars will collapse, explode, or simply fade into cold, dead cinders. Everything in the universe, from the microscopic architecture of a single human cell to the sprawling, majestic spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy, is currently dying. This is not a tragic flaw in the design of the cosmos. It is not an accident, and it is not a mistake. It is the fundamental operating system of reality. It is the second law of thermodynamics. In the realm of physics, there are many laws that describe how the universe behaves. There are laws governing the attraction of gravity, the invisible push and pull of electromagnetism, and the bizarre, probabilistic behavior of subatomic particles. But the second law of thermodynamics sits upon a different throne entirely. It is the undisputed, undefeated heavyweight champion of the physical sciences. The physicist Arthur Eddington famously stated that if your theory disagrees with the second law of thermodynamics, you should abandon all hope, for there is nothing for your theory to do but collapse in the deepest humiliation. Albert Einstein himself believed it was the only physical theory of universal content that would never be overthrown. But what exactly is this law? In popular culture, we often reduce the second law to a single, oversimplified word: chaos. We are told that the universe tends toward chaos, like a teenager's bedroom naturally getting messier over time unless energy is expended to clean it up. But the word chaos is a profoundly human concept. It implies a sense of messiness, a lack of aesthetic order, a failure to meet our specific, biological desires for structure. The universe, however, does not care about your messy bedroom. It does not care about what humans consider organized or disorganized. The The universe only cares about one thing: the distribution of energy. Entropy, the core mathematical concept of the second law, is not a measure of chaos. It is a measure of energy dispersal. It is a measure of how spread out, how diluted, and how evenly distributed the energy of a physical system has become. The universe harbors a deep, fundamental hatred for concentrated energy. It abhors hotspots. It despises imbalances. Whenever the universe finds a pocket of dense, highly ordered energy, it immediately sets to work, tearing it apart and smearing it out across the surrounding void. The universe demands equilibrium, and it will stop at nothing to achieve it. Imagine a steaming cup of coffee resting on a wooden table in a quiet, cool room. Within the boundary of that ceramic mug, you have a localized pocket of intense thermal energy. The water molecules inside are vibrating violently, ricocheting off one another at blinding speeds. But the cosmos cannot abide this localized concentration. The universe demands that this energy be shared. And so, the rapidly moving water molecules collide with the inner walls of the mug, transferring their kinetic energy. The ceramic warms up. The outside of the mug then collides with the slower-moving molecules of the surrounding air. The heat bleeds outward, diffusing into the room, spreading further and further, bouncing from molecule to molecule until the coffee, the mug, and the air in the room are all the exact same temperature. The energy has not been destroyed. The first law of thermodynamics guarantees that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. But the energy has been irrevocably dispersed. It has achieved equilibrium. And once that thermal equilibrium is reached, absolutely nothing else happens. The coffee will never spontaneously reheat itself. The scattered thermal energy will never gather back together from the corners of the room, march backward through the air, and plunge back into the mug to boil the water. The process is absolute. It is dictated by the laws of probability, and it is strictly a one-way street. Why does this happen? Why does energy always spread out and never spontaneously concentrate? The answer lies in the cold, unfeeling mathematics of chance. There is no magical, invisible force pulling the heat out of the coffee. It simply comes down to the rolling of cosmic dice. Imagine a perfectly sealed, microscopic glass box. Inside this box, floating exactly in the center, is a tightly packed cluster of 100 oxygen molecules. This is a state of incredibly low entropy. It is highly ordered, highly concentrated, and astronomically unlikely to occur by pure chance. The moment you release those molecules from their invisible constraints, they begin to move. They bounce around, ricocheting off the walls of the box and off each other in a chaotic, unpredictable dance. After just a few fractions of a second, you look inside the box, and the molecules are evenly distributed throughout the entire space. They did not spread out because they wanted to. They spread out because there is only one specific way for all 100 molecules to be perfectly clustered in the dead center of the box. But there are trillions upon trillions of different possible arrangements where the molecules are scattered randomly throughout the space. The universe simply gravitates toward the most probable outcome. And the most probable outcome is always, invariably, a perfectly even distribution. Concentrated order is rare and fragile. Dispersed disorder is overwhelmingly likely. Entropy increases simply because there are infinitely more ways for a system to be disordered than for it to be ordered. This brings us to the most profound, mind-bending consequence of the second law of thermodynamics. It is not just a rule about heat and energy. It is the very architecture of time itself. Human beings experience time as a relentless, unidirectional river. We are dragged forward, kicking and screaming from the past, through the fleeting present, and into the unknown future. We remember yesterday, but we cannot remember tomorrow. We feel ourselves aging, but we never feel ourselves growing younger. Our psychological experience of time is completely asymmetrical. But if you look at the fundamental mathematical equations that govern the universe, this asymmetry completely disappears. Look at Isaac Newton's laws of classical mechanics, which describe the motion of planets and pendulums. Look at Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity, which maps the curvature of space-time. Look at the Schrödinger equation of quantum mechanics, which dictates the probabilistic behavior of subatomic particles. If you take any of these mathematical frameworks and flip the variable for time from positive to negative, if you run the equations backward, they still work perfectly. Physics, at its most fundamental, microscopic level, is completely time reversible. The fundamental laws of nature do not care which way time flows. If you zoom in with a powerful enough microscope and watch two individual atoms collide and bounce apart in the vacuum, and then you rewind the footage and watch it in reverse, the collision looks exactly the same. The physics are entirely valid in both directions. In the microscopic world, there is no past and there is no future. There is only geometry, mass, and motion. So why does our macroscopic world look so incredibly different? If the underlying code of the universe is time reversible, why can you not unshatter a glass? Why can you not unburn a log? Why can you not stir cream out of your coffee and separate it back into a perfect white droplet? The answer is entropy. The second law of thermodynamics is the only physical law in the entire scientific canon that demands a specific direction. It is the only law that insists the future must look fundamentally different from the past. When a glass falls off a table and shatters into 1,000 jagged fragments on the floor, the kinetic energy of the fall is dispersed as sound waves traveling through the air and as a microscopic amount of heat transferred to the floorboards. To unshatter the glass, every single one of those dispersed sound waves would have to perfectly bounce off the walls of the room, travel backward, and strike the glass fragments at the exact right angle. The microscopic heat in the floorboards would have to perfectly transfer back into the glass as kinetic energy, launching the pieces upward to seamlessly reassemble in the air. According to the time-reversible laws of fundamental physics, this is technically possible. It does not violate the laws of motion. But according to the laws of probability, according to entropy, it is so astronomically unlikely that you could watch that shattered glass for 1 trillion times the current age of the universe, and it would never happen. Entropy is the arrow of time. It is the relentless, statistical degradation of the universe that pushes us forward. The reason the past is different from the future is simply that the universe was in a state of lower entropy yesterday than it is today, and tomorrow the entropy will be higher still. We are surfboarding on a cosmic wave of decaying energy, riding the breakdown of order from the Big Bang to the end of time. If we take this concept and scale it up to the largest possible dimensions, expanding our view from a shattered glass on a kitchen floor to the entire 13.8 billion year history of the cosmos, a chilling narrative begins to unfold. We know that our universe began in a state of staggeringly low entropy. The Big Bang was not just a massive explosion of heat and light. It was a tightly wound, infinitely dense spring of concentrated order. We do not know why the universe was born in this highly specific, highly improbable state of low entropy, but we know that it was. And ever since that singular moment of creation, that cosmic spring has been unwinding. The entire sweeping history of the cosmos is nothing more than the story of energy slowly, relentlessly spreading out. The formation of the first stars was just gravity pulling gas together so that it could ignite and radiate heat out into the empty void. The dazzling, violent explosions of supernovae, the majestic collisions of entire galaxies, the swirling accretion disks of supermassive black holes. Every spectacular, violent event you can witness through a telescope is just the universe trying to mix itself, trying to find equilibrium, trying to smooth out its energy gradients. And this process has a final, inescapable destination. We know exactly how this story ends. Because the universe is expanding, and because entropy must always strictly increase, the cosmos is marching relentlessly toward a state of maximum disorder. Physicists call this ultimate fate the heat death of the universe. Do not let the word death fool you into thinking of a sudden, violent catastrophe. The heat death is not an explosion. It is a slow, agonizing fade into eternal twilight. Trillions upon trillions of years from now, long after the Earth is gone and the sun is nothing but a cold, dense rock, the last generation of stars will exhaust their final reserves of hydrogen. They will flicker, dim, and die. The universe will plunge into an age of absolute darkness. The galaxies, no longer bound by the gravity of shining stars, will slowly dissolve, scattering their dead remnants into the expanding void. Even the supermassive black holes, the great, terrifying titans of the cosmos, are not immune to the laws of thermodynamics. Over unimaginable timescales, they will slowly leak their mass back into the universe through a process called Hawking radiation, evaporating into a faint, ghostly mist of subatomic particles. Eventually, every single atom, every single photon, and every single unit of energy will be perfectly, evenly distributed across an infinitely large, infinitely cold expanse of space. There will be no hot spots. There will be no cold spots. There will be absolutely no energy differentials whatsoever. The temperature of the entire cosmos will approach a uniform fraction of a degree above absolute zero. This is the state of maximum entropy. This is complete thermal stillness. Because there are no longer any differences in energy, there is no way for heat to flow. And without the flow of heat, without energy moving from a high concentration to a low concentration, absolutely no physical work can be done. Nothing can move. Nothing can interact. Nothing can happen. Time itself, which relies on the continuous increase of entropy to give it a direction, will effectively cease to have any meaning. The universe will have finally achieved the perfect, unbroken equilibrium it has been seeking since the moment of the Big Bang. It will be a profound, eternal, and absolute silence. This is the undefeated law. This is the inescapable reality of the cosmos we inhabit. The universe is a grand, intricate machine that is winding down, exhausting its energy, and preparing to sleep forever in the dark. And yet, right now, in this specific, fleeting window of cosmic time, we are here. We are not evenly distributed dust. We are not a faint mist of radiation. We are human beings. We are breathtakingly complex, localized pockets of intense, highly structured order. We possess brains forged from billions of neurons, intricately wired together in a lattice of staggering complexity, capable of processing information, feeling emotion, and contemplating our own eventual demise. We stand in direct, apparent defiance of the universe's demand for decay. We build towering skyscrapers of steel and glass. We compose magnificent symphonies of sound, and we write equations that map the very boundaries of reality. We are the ultimate expression of organized energy, floating in a universe that is supposedly dedicated to the eradication of all organization. How is this possible? If the absolute mandate of reality is to spread energy out and break structure down, why did the blind, uncaring forces of physics bother to construct the human mind? If the cosmos is a dying machine marching toward thermal stillness, why did it suddenly, briefly, wake up and look around? We are forced to confront the terrifying possibility that life is not a miraculous exception to the rules of physics. It is a feature of them. We must ask if the intricate order of biology and the profound depth of human consciousness are actually the universe's most brilliant, devastating inventions, designed not to defy the second law of thermodynamics, but to serve it. When you look out into the crushing, unimaginable depths of the cosmos, the most striking feature is not the violent birth of stars or the majestic sweeping arms of distant galaxies. The most striking feature of the universe is its overwhelming, profound silence. The vast majority of reality is entirely dead. It is a freezing, irradiated vacuum stretching out across billions of light years, governed by the cold and uncompromising mandate of the second law of thermodynamics. The cosmos is a machine that is relentlessly winding down. It is a system fundamentally obsessed with erasing complexity, tearing down structure, and spreading energy as thinly and evenly as possible across the dark. Every burning sun and every spinning planet is slowly being ground into cosmic dust by the sheer statistical weight of entropy. The universe demands equilibrium, and it achieves this equilibrium through the patient, merciless destruction of order. Against this backdrop of cosmic homogenization, we find an anomaly so absurd, so mathematically improbable, that it seems to defy the very foundation of physical reality. Floating in the silent void, orbiting a highly ordinary yellow dwarf star, is a pale blue sphere teeming with a phenomenon that simply should not exist. Earth is a localized pocket of sheer, aggressive complexity. From a purely thermodynamic perspective, our planet is an absolute freak of nature. It is a loud, chaotic, and relentlessly ordered rebellion against the silence of the void. To truly grasp the magnitude of this paradox, we must look closely at what biological life actually is. We are so accustomed to the presence of trees, animals, and our own bodies that we have become blind to the staggering, almost terrifying physical reality of our own existence. We tend to think of nature as something peaceful, a gentle and harmonious system. But under the lens of theoretical physics, biology is not a peaceful garden. It is a fortress. It is a highly advanced, impossibly dense architecture of nanotechnology fighting a continuous, desperate war against the fundamental laws of the universe. Consider the fundamental unit of this rebellion, a single living cell. In a universe that demands the even distribution of matter, the cell constructs a rigid, semi-permeable membrane, building a physical wall between itself and the outside world. It refuses to blend in. The universe wants the chemical concentration inside the cell to be exactly the same as the chemical concentration outside the cell. It wants the molecules to diffuse, to settle, to reach a state of dead thermal equilibrium. But the cell aggressively fights back. It utilizes millions of microscopic, protein-based pumps to continuously shovel ions across its membrane, pushing sodium out and pulling potassium in, maintaining a steep, highly unnatural chemical gradient. This is the active, deliberate refusal of equilibrium. And within the fortified walls of this microscopic city, the level of organization scales up into the realm of the incomprehensible. Deep inside the nucleus lies the DAR molecule, the blueprint of biological defiance. DNA is a masterpiece of concentrated information storage. It consists of billions of molecular base pairs, arranged in a perfect, crystalline double helix, coiled and folded with a geometric precision that rivals the most advanced engineering of human civilization. In a universe where information is constantly being scrambled, corrupted, and lost to the chaotic thermal noise of the void, DNA successfully copies, repairs, and transmits its pristine data across billions of years of deep time. It is a highly structured, low-entropy molecule that somehow survives in a high-entropy universe. The instructions written in that DNA are translated into proteins, and here the illusion of order becomes even more profound. The proteins do not just clump together like scattered cosmic dust. Governed by the precise, invisible laws of quantum chemistry, these long chains of amino acids fold themselves into highly specific, complex, three-dimensional shapes. They become microscopic engines. They become chemical scissors, structural scaffolds, and cargo-hauling motors that walk along the internal skeleton of the cell. They work in perfect, choreographed synchronicity, repairing damage, generating energy, and neutralizing threats with a mechanical efficiency that defies the random, chaotic movement of dead matter. When you scale this microscopic architecture up to the macroscopic level, the defiance of entropy becomes a daily, visible miracle. Look at the rhythmic, relentless beating of a human heart. It is composed of millions of specialized cardiac muscle cells, synchronizing their electrical discharges to pulse in unison. Day after day, decade after decade, this living pump pushes oxygen-rich fluid through tens of thousands of miles of branching, perfectly mapped vessels, delivering high-quality energy to the furthest reaches of the body. Look at the architecture of the human eye, capturing scattered photons of ancient starlight and translating them into crisp, electrical impulses. Look at the immune system, a sprawling, highly intelligent internal army capable of recognizing, hunting, and dismantling foreign invaders with molecular precision. This is not just structure. This is a sustained, localized concentration of extreme energy and order. It is a staggering tower of physical complexity standing in the middle of a universe that supposedly hates complexity. For decades, this absolute contradiction kept the greatest minds in physics and biology awake at night. If the second law of thermodynamics is the undisputed, undefeated ruler of reality, how did biological life ever get off the ground? How did dead, scattered chemistry in the primordial oceans of the early Earth suddenly organize itself into a self-replicating information processing machine? Our everyday experience tells us that if you leave a physical system alone, it degrades, it rots. If you abandon a magnificent stone castle in the middle of a forest, the roots will tear at its foundations, the rain will dissolve its mortar, and the wind will scatter its stones until it is indistinguishable from the dirt. The castle will never spontaneously rebuild itself. A shattered glass will never spontaneously reassemble on a table. But on the early Earth, the exact opposite seemed to occur. A barren, toxic ocean of scattered, high-entropy chemicals somehow fought against the cosmic tide and assembled itself into a living cell. The dirt stood up, organized itself, and started walking. The sheer statistical improbability of a living cell assembling by random chance has often been compared to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and accidentally assembling a fully functioning commercial jetliner. The math simply does not seem to work. It feels as though biology and thermodynamics are fundamentally at war, representing two entirely incompatible versions of reality. In the mid-20th century, the brilliant physicist Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics, turned his attention to this glaring paradox. he published a deeply influential book titled simply, "What is Life?" Schrödinger realized that living organisms are essentially massive thermodynamic anomalies. He argued that the only way biological life can maintain its staggering internal order, the only way it can avoid the rapid decay into thermal equilibrium, is by constantly feeding on what he called negative entropy. Schrödinger pointed out that to be alive is to be in a constant state of panic. A living organism is like a leaking ship, desperately and continuously bailing out water just to stay afloat. We must constantly consume high-quality, highly ordered energy from our environment. We take in the concentrated radiation of the sun, we consume the complex chemical structures of plants and other animals, and we strip them of their order. We use that stolen energy to maintain the perfect geometry of our DNA, the folding of our proteins, and the beating of our hearts. And in return, we excrete low-quality energy back into the universe in the form of waste and radiated heat. The moment an organism stops this continuous, exhausting process of energy extraction, the illusion of order instantly shatters. The ion pumps stop firing, the cell walls break down, the proteins unravel. The highly concentrated thermal energy of the body bleeds out into the surrounding air, and within a remarkably short period of time, the organism reaches a state of perfect, dead equilibrium with its environment. This is the strict thermodynamic definition of death. It is the moment the second law finally reclaims its stolen territory. This understanding frames life not as a peaceful state of being, but as a violent, continuous physical process. Yet, even with Schrödinger's brilliant insights into how life maintains itself by feeding on order, the deepest question remained completely unanswered. We understood the mechanics of the leaking ship, but we still had no idea why the ship was ever built in the first place. Is life simply a miraculous glitch in the cosmic code? Was the birth of the first biological cell just an incomprehensible accident of probability? A moment where the cosmic dice just happened to roll 1,000,000,000,000 sixes in a row? Human beings are natural storytellers, and we are deeply biased toward our own existence. We love the narrative of the underdog. For centuries, we have internalized the idea that life is a heroic, poetic rebellion against the cold, dead universe. We view the biosphere of Earth as a fragile, precious flame holding back the encroaching dark, fighting a valiant but ultimately doomed battle against the great, universal unraveling of entropy. We want to believe that the staggering order of our bodies and the intricate complexity of our minds are somehow special, a localized victory over the grim mathematics of decay. But the universe does not make exceptions. The cold, unfeeling machinery of physical law does not tolerate miracles, and it does not have blind spots. Gravity does not occasionally take a day off. Electromagnetism does not selectively ignore certain atoms. And the second law of thermodynamics, the absolute ruler of time and energy, does not simply look the other way while a muddy puddle on a rocky planet spontaneously transforms itself into a sprawling, conscious biosphere. If life exists, it must exist strictly within the boundaries of physical law. It must be a direct consequence of the rules, not a violation of them. And this realization forces us to stare into a profoundly uncomfortable abyss. If the universe is entirely dedicated to the destruction of order and the maximization of entropy, and if biological life is entirely bound by the laws of this universe, then our fundamental understanding of what life is must be upside down. The breathtaking complexity of the cell, the perfect architecture of DNA, and the rhythmic beating of the human heart cannot be a rebellion against thermodynamics. We are forced to ask a question that threatens to dismantle our entire sense of purpose and identity. What if the staggering order of biology is not a defiance of the universe's desire for chaos, but rather the exact mechanism the universe uses to achieve it? What if this beautiful, localized perfection is nothing more than an illusion, a temporary structural trick designed to serve a much darker, much more fundamental cosmic agenda? The implications are staggering. We look at a towering redwood tree, a soaring eagle, or the intricate neural pathways of the human brain, and we see the pinnacle of natural organization. But the cold equations of physics suggest we might be looking at something entirely different. We might be looking at the universe's most advanced, highly engineered tools for destruction. If the cosmos is a machine grinding relentlessly toward thermal stillness, it requires mechanisms to dissipate its stored energy. It requires engines to break down its order. As we pull back the veil on the illusion of biological order, we leave behind the comforting notion of life as a cosmic miracle. We step into a reality where the boundary between dead, scattered matter and conscious, living beings begins to violently blur. The universe did not create the staggering architecture of life to preserve order against the dark. It may have built us for the exact opposite reason. For a century, biology and theoretical physics stood on opposite sides of a profound conceptual chasm. We looked out into the immense, unforgiving void of deep space and accepted the cold reality that the universe is a machine winding down. We understood that the cosmos is governed by the absolute authority of the Second Law of Thermodynamics, a system fundamentally obsessed with erasing complexity and spreading energy as thinly and evenly as possible across the dark. Yet, we looked at ourselves and saw a staggering, defiant architecture of order. We saw the perfect geometry of DNA, the choreographed folding of proteins, and the rhythmic, relentless beating of the heart. We assumed we were an exception to the rule. We told ourselves that biological life was a beautiful, improbable accident. We believed we were a localized rebellion against the grim mathematics of cosmic decay. But the scientific method demands that we interrogate our deepest assumptions, especially those that offer us philosophical comfort. When we finally turn the unforgiving light of modern thermodynamics onto the origin of life, the comforting illusion of our biological rebellion completely shatters. If the universe is entirely dedicated to the destruction of order and the maximization of entropy, then biological life cannot possibly be a mistake. The machinery of the cosmos is too vast, too absolute, and too merciless to allow for a localized glitch of this magnitude to persist for 4 billion years. If life exists, it must serve the underlying physical laws of reality. It must be a direct consequence of them. This realization brings us to a radical, chilling paradigm shift in theoretical physics, spearheaded by researchers like Jeremy England. It is a mathematical framework known as dissipation-driven adaptation. It suggests a concept that entirely inverts our understanding of existence. The universe does not simply tolerate biological life because it managed to slip through a statistical crack. The universe creates life because life is profoundly, ruthlessly efficient at doing exactly what the universe wants. To understand this staggering shift in perspective, we have to look at the Earth not as a fragile biological sanctuary, but as a raw thermodynamic system. Imagine the barren, primordial Earth, billions of years ago. It is a rocky sphere surrounded by a toxic atmosphere and sloshing, lifeless oceans of scattered chemical compounds. If this planet existed in a completely closed, dark system, the chemicals in the water would simply react, settle, and reach a state of dead thermal equilibrium. Nothing complex would ever form. But the Earth is not a closed system. It is continuously, violently bombarded by an intense, relentless stream of energy from the sun. The sun is a raging nuclear furnace, blasting concentrated, low-entropy photons across the freezing vacuum of space, directly into the atmosphere and oceans of our planet. According to the rigid laws of thermodynamics, all of this highly concentrated energy must be dissipated. It must be broken down and spread out. The universe inherently hates the intense concentration of the sun's energy, and it demands that the Earth process it into scattered, disorganized heat. When a concentrated beam of sunlight strikes a dead, lifeless rocky surface, the rock heats up. It absorbs the low-entropy photons and slowly radiates that energy back into the freezing vacuum of space as high-entropy infrared heat. The rock is doing the universe's work. It is following the laws of physics. It is increasing the total entropy of the cosmos. But dead matter is rigid. It is inflexible. A solid piece of granite is a highly inefficient machine for dissipating energy because it can only absorb and radiate heat based on its simple, static surface area. Now, imagine a random, chaotic soup of carbon-based molecules floating in that same sunlit primordial ocean. These molecules are not locked into a rigid grid like stone. They are restless. They are being constantly hit by incoming solar radiation. The raw energy forces the chemical bonds between the atoms to vibrate, to break apart, and to violently reform in new, unpredictable configurations. Mathematical models in modern thermodynamics suggest something profoundly counterintuitive about this restless matter. When you take a random group of atoms and continuously drive them with a massive external energy source like the sun, while surrounding them with a heat bath like an ocean or an atmosphere, the atoms will not remain in a state of simple, disorganized chaos. Over deep time, the physical laws of the universe will actively favor chemical structures that are better at absorbing and dissipating that specific energy. The matter will begin to spontaneously organize itself. It will form complex shapes, intricate molecular networks, and highly ordered carbon structures. It does this not because it wants to be alive, and not because of a miraculous statistical accident. It organizes itself because those complex, intricate structures are exponentially better at capturing the concentrated energy of the sun and bleeding it out as chaotic waste heat. Think about a leaf on a tree. To the naked human eye, a leaf is a masterpiece of localized order. It is an intricate biological solar panel, packed with perfectly aligned chloroplasts, woven together by a network of precise microscopic veins and protected by a waxy cellular epidermis. It takes a massive amount of internal organization to build a leaf, to unfold it toward the sky, and to keep its cellular machinery running. But to understand the physics of life, we must look past the illusion of the structure and focus entirely on the thermodynamic transaction taking place. The leaf is not a monument to biological order. It is an engine of cosmic decay. When a low-entropy photon from the sun travels across 93 million miles of empty space and strikes the surface of the leaf, the complex biological machinery intercepts it. The plant utilizes a tiny, microscopic fraction of that concentrated solar energy to build its highly ordered cellular walls and sustain its internal chemistry. But in the process of maintaining that tiny pocket of order, the plant takes the vast majority of the photon's energy, shatters it, and radiates a massive cloud of highly disorganized, low-quality heat into the surrounding atmosphere. This is the brilliant, devastating mechanism that allows life to exist without ever violating the second law of thermodynamics. The universe allows the plant to build a highly ordered, incredibly complex internal structure because that specific physical structure accelerates the destruction of energy in the surrounding environment. the local decrease in entropy within the boundary of the leaf is heavily outweighed by the massive, invisible increase in global entropy it produces. The plant is essentially taking a crisp, pristine $100 bill of incoming solar energy, keeping a single penny to maintain its own highly structured existence, and violently shredding the remaining $99 into worthless thermal confetti, tossing it into the cosmic wind. Local order pays for itself by causing a massive increase in global disorder. The staggering architecture of biology is simply the physical cost of doing business in a universe that wants to break energy down as fast as possible. The implications of this thermodynamic reality completely rewrite the story of our origins. We have always assumed that the emergence of life was a freak accident of chemistry. We often hear the formation of the first replicating cell compared to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and accidentally assembling a fully functioning commercial jetliner. The sheer statistical improbability of random molecules bumping into each other and forming DNA without an underlying driving force is astronomically low. It is a mathematical nightmare that has given skeptics of biology ammunition for decades. But the dissipation hypothesis exposes the fatal, fundamental flaw in that famous analogy. The primordial Earth is not a dead, closed junkyard. It is a system being relentlessly driven by an external, nuclear power source. If you shine a massive flood of concentrated energy into a chaotic soup of raw chemicals for millions of years, you should not be surprised when a plant eventually emerges. The universe randomly organizes matter into complex biological structures simply because those structures are incredibly efficient at doing what the universe inevitably demands. They are perfectly tuned instruments of dissipation. Life is not a rebellion against the grim, decaying march of time. Life is a thermodynamic engine driven entirely by it. We are the universe's way of hitting the fast-forward button on its own inevitable demise. Consider the difference between a dead planet and a living one. Look at the barren, lifeless surface of Mars. The red planet receives sunlight from the exact same star we do. The rocks heat up in the Martian day, and they cool down in the Martian night. Mars increases the entropy of the solar system at a steady, slow, and entirely predictable rate. It is a simple, inefficient thermal system. Now look at Earth. Earth is covered in a sprawling, pulsating, highly aggressive biosphere. Millions of species of plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria are locked in a frantic, continuous cycle of consuming, digesting, and radiating. The biological engine of Earth takes the high-quality energy of the Sun, along with the high-quality chemical bonds of the planet itself, and shreds them into waste heat with a terrifying, compounding efficiency. A barren desert reflects a large portion of sunlight back into space as usable light. But a dense, dark green rainforest absorbs almost all of the visible light that hits it, churning it through trillions of microscopic cellular engines and releasing it as disorganized infrared heat. If you want to cool down a hot cup of coffee, you blow on it to increase the rate of heat transfer. If the universe wants to cool down a massive gradient of solar energy, it builds a forest. Living matter is simply faster, hungrier, and more ruthless at generating entropy than dead matter could ever hope to be. This realization strips away the romantic, poetic veil we have so carefully wrapped around our own existence. We look at the majestic, interconnected food webs of a savanna, the intricate, stealthy hunting strategies of apex predators, and the miraculous, rapid division of cells within a developing embryo. We see a thriving, vibrant celebration of survival. We see the beauty of nature. But under the unforgiving, objective lens of theoretical physics, we are looking at a massive, planetary-scale machine specifically designed for thermal degradation. The predator chases the prey, burning calories and generating heat. The prey consumes the grass, breaking down complex carbohydrates and generating heat. The grass absorbs the light, processing photons and generating heat. It is an endless, violent, interconnected cascade of thermodynamics. Every single layer of biological complexity exists solely because it is slightly better at breaking down concentrated energy than the layer that came before it. This cold, mathematical truth scales all the way up the evolutionary ladder. We are taught to view evolution by natural selection as a purely biological mechanism, a slow, historical process driven by random genetic mutation and the survival of the fittest. But we rarely stop to ask what fundamental physics actually define the concept of fitness. What makes one arrangement of atoms fitter than another? In the stark context of the dissipation hypothesis, the fittest organism is simply the one that is best at finding concentrated energy in its environment, consuming it, and dissipating it. The organisms that survive, thrive, and reproduce are the thermodynamic winners of their specific ecological niche. As the grand, sprawling tree of evolution marched forward over hundreds of millions of years, the blind physical laws of the universe relentlessly favored biological structures that could process energy faster, move quicker, and interact more aggressively with their surroundings. The universe favored the development of complex sensory organs to detect energy gradients. It favored the development of muscle tissue to physically move toward those energy sources. And most importantly, it favored the emergence of highly complex, centralized nervous systems to coordinate this frantic search for consumption. We are left standing on the edge of a profoundly unsettling philosophical precipice. The intricate, staggering architecture of the biological world is not a monument to order standing brave and defiant in a chaotic universe. It is the exact opposite. It is the physical, tangible manifestation of the universe's absolute, unwavering commitment to chaos. The very atoms in your body are organized into their specific, incredibly complex patterns, because that specific biological organization allows you to radiate heat into the room around you at an optimal rate. The rhythmic beating of your heart, the inflating of your lungs, and the silent, invisible firing of your neurons are all fundamentally acts of thermal degradation. You exist in all your astonishing complexity because the void demands equilibrium, and you are the fastest way to get there. This framework forces us to abandon the comforting idea that we are a miraculous exception to the rules of physics. We are not an accident, but we are also not a rebellion. We are the ultimate expression of the physical laws we thought we were defying. As we follow this thermodynamic logic up the evolutionary chain, moving from the simple division of the first cells to the hyper-complex, energy-hungry nervous systems of advanced mammals, we are inevitably led to the most complex, highly ordered, and energy-dense structure in the known universe. We are led to the human mind. And we must ask what role our awareness, our memories, and our subjective experience play in this grand, terrifying cosmic engine of decay. If we accept the chilling premise that the fundamental purpose of biological life is to act as a highly efficient engine for thermal decay, we must then follow this logic to its absolute, inevitable extreme. We must scale up. A single, primitive cell floating in a primordial ocean is certainly an engine of entropy. It takes in concentrated energy, uses a tiny fraction of it to maintain its internal structure, and radiates the rest as disorganized heat. But a single cell is a slow, quiet machine. It is the thermodynamic equivalent of a softly ticking wristwatch. It dissipates energy, but it does so at a microscopic, almost negligible pace. The physical laws of the universe, however, are rarely satisfied with slow and quiet. If the relentless drive of the cosmos is to smooth out energy gradients as quickly and efficiently as possible, then simple, single-celled life is merely a prototype. It is a proof of concept. Over hundreds of millions of years of deep time, the blind, mechanical forces of evolution began to compound. Cells merged. They formed specialized tissues. They built sprawling, multicellular organisms capable of moving, hunting, and consuming vast amounts of raw materials. Evolution is often framed as a biological arms race for survival, but underneath the surface, it is a thermodynamic arms race for consumption. The universe relentlessly favored organisms that could locate concentrated energy, tear it apart, and exhaust it into the void faster than their competitors. When we follow this evolutionary trajectory upward, moving past the cold-blooded reptiles soaking up ambient solar heat, and past the warm-blooded mammals burning internal calories just to maintain their body temperature, we eventually arrive at the apex of this thermodynamic pyramid. We arrive at the most complex, the most demanding, and the most fiercely expensive physical structure in the known universe. Inside the dark, silent, armored vault of your skull rests a 3-pound mass of fat, water, and protein. It is entirely isolated from the outside world. It has no direct access to light. It feels no wind. It hears no sound. And yet, this soft, wet, incredibly fragile organ is responsible for constructing the entire reality you are currently experiencing. It renders the colors of the world, processes the complex vibrations of the air into spoken language, and harbors the agonizing depths of human emotion. We are so intimately attached to our own consciousness that we naturally view the human mind as something ethereal, something weightless and detached from the crude, mechanical reality of physics. We treat our thoughts as if they were ghosts. But the universe does not tolerate ghosts. The universe only tolerates physical processes. And when we examine the human brain through the unforgiving, objective lens of thermodynamics, the romantic illusion of a weightless mind completely evaporates. The human brain is a thermonuclear reactor of entropy. It is a blazing, localized hotspot of intense physical labor, driven by a metabolic furnace that burns with an almost terrifying ferocity. To understand the sheer scale of what is happening inside your head right now, we only need to look at the exorbitant physical cost required to keep the lights on. In the average adult human, the brain accounts for roughly 2% of the total body weight. It is a tiny, localized fraction of your physical mass. And yet, it demands a staggering 20% of your entire energy supply. 1/5 of every breath you take, 1/5 of every heartbeat, and 1/5 of every calorie you consume is immediately hijacked and diverted directly to the skull. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, this energy tax is completely insane. Nature is notoriously frugal. In the brutal, unforgiving environment of the ancient Earth, calories were rare and incredibly difficult to acquire. An organism that spends 20% of its hard-won energy on a single organ that cannot be used to physically fight off a predator, outrun a threat, or digest raw meat is an organism that is living dangerously close to the edge of metabolic bankruptcy. The brain is an incredibly greedy, demanding machine. It requires a massive, uninterrupted river of highly ordered chemical energy in the form of glucose, delivered by a dense, sprawling network of blood vessels. If this oxygen and glucose supply is interrupted for even a few brief minutes, the staggering internal architecture of the brain begins to violently unravel. The neurons suffocate, the intricate protein structures collapse. Irreversible, catastrophic damage sets in, followed rapidly by total system failure. The brain operates so incredibly far from thermal equilibrium that it requires a constant, roaring fire of metabolism just to prevent itself from collapsing into dead matter.
But where exactly is all this energy going? What is the brain actually doing with this massive intake of calories and oxygen?
To answer this, we must strip away the abstract concepts of psychology and philosophy and look at the raw, mechanical physics of a single thought. When you remember a childhood memory, when you solve a mathematical equation, or when you simply process the visual information of the room around you, you are not experiencing a magical, immaterial event. You are experiencing a violent, localized electrical storm. The brain is composed of approximately 86 billion neurons, intricately wired together across trillions of microscopic gaps known as synapses. Every single one of these 86 billion neurons is a physical, working machine. And even when you are perfectly still, even when you are asleep, these machines are engaged in a desperate, exhausting physical labor. Picture a single neuron at rest. It is not actually resting at all. It is acting like a coiled spring, holding immense potential energy. To maintain this tension, the membrane of the neuron is embedded with millions of microscopic, protein-based engines known as sodium-potassium pumps. These pumps are the biological equivalent of bailing water out of a sinking ship. The laws of thermodynamics desperately want the chemical concentration inside the neuron to be perfectly equal to the concentration outside. The universe wants equilibrium. But the pump violently fights back. Utilizing the high-grade energy delivered by your bloodstream, these tiny engines physically shovel positively charged sodium ions out of the cell and drag potassium ions back in, working strictly against the natural gradient. This relentless, microscopic labor creates a steep electrical tension across the membrane. The inside of the neuron becomes negatively charged compared to the outside. The spring is now fully wound. The neuron is loaded, hovering in a state of highly unstable, artificial order, waiting for a trigger. Then, a thought occurs. A signal arrives from a neighboring cell. The threshold is breached. In a fraction of a millisecond, microscopic trapdoors in the membrane violently snap open. The universe briefly gets exactly what it wants. Equilibrium. The sodium ions, driven by the sheer, crushing force of thermodynamic pressure, flood back into the neuron. The electrical tension snaps. A massive voltage spike, known as an action potential, surges down the long, branching wire of the axon at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. When this electrical surge reaches the end of the line, it hits a physical barrier. The synaptic cleft, the microscopic gap between one neuron and the next. The electrical signal cannot cross the empty space. So, the neuron instantly converts this electrical energy back into a chemical transaction. The voltage spike triggers the violent rupture of tiny biological packets, flooding the gap with complex neurotransmitters. These molecules drift across the void, bind to the receptors of the next cell, and trigger the entire exhausting, energy-intensive process all over again. This is the physical reality of consciousness. It is the coordinated, synchronized firing of billions of microscopic engines. It is the snapping open and shutting of ion channels, the surging of electrical currents, and the violent release of chemical packets. Now, take that single, localized event and multiply it by 86 billion. Multiply it by the trillions of connections firing dozens, sometimes hundreds of times a second across the sprawling, dense architecture of the cerebral cortex. The sheer volume of physical activity occurring inside the human skull at any given moment is mathematically staggering. And the absolute, inescapable rule of physics dictates that every single one of those microscopic actions carries a thermodynamic cost. You cannot pump an ion against a gradient for free. You cannot fire an electrical signal down a biological wire for free. You cannot synthesize, release, and reabsorb complex neurotransmitters without paying the physical toll. Every time a sodium-potassium pump resets a neuron, it burns a molecule of ATP, the fundamental energy currency of the cell. The high-quality, highly ordered chemical bonds of the glucose you ate for breakfast are violently broken apart to fuel this process. The energy is utilized, the physical work is done, and the inevitable byproduct is generated: heat. The human brain is quite literally a biological heater. It burns through resources with such terrifying intensity that the blood rushing up through the carotid arteries acts as a vital liquid cooling system, sweeping the waste heat away from the delicate neural tissues and distributing it out through the surface of your skin to be radiated into the atmosphere. The intense concentration of order required to maintain a conscious mind is paid for by the massive, continuous exhaust of disorganized thermal energy into the surrounding environment. You are heating up the room simply by being aware of it. You are increasing the overall entropy of the universe simply by possessing the ability to think. When we view the brain through this cold, mechanical framework, the illusion of our own separation from the universe dissolves entirely. We often feel as though we are passive observers, sitting inside our bodies, watching the cosmos unfold like a movie on a screen. But perception is not a passive event. Perception is an industrial process. When you look up at the night sky and witness the faint, ancient light of a distant star, the photons entering your eye trigger a massive, cascading avalanche of physical work deep within your visual cortex. Millions of neurons burn physical fuel to construct the image, to access your memory, to recognize the object as a star, and to generate the subtle, emotional feeling of awe. The very act of recognizing the universe physically accelerates the decay of the universe. This brings us face to face with the most haunting, deeply unsettling implication of our own existence. If the dissipation hypothesis is correct, if the universe builds complex biological structures specifically because they are efficient engines for generating entropy, then the human brain is not a cosmic accident. It is not a miraculous, poetic rebellion against the dark. It is the ultimate, perfected weapon of thermodynamics. Dead, rocky planets dissipate energy slowly. Simple, single-celled bacteria dissipate energy faster. Basic animals, driven by instinct to hunt and consume, dissipate energy faster still. But the conscious mind is an entirely different class of engine. Because we possess advanced, hyper-complex nervous systems, we are not limited to the slow, agonizing process of biological evolution to increase our rate of consumption. Our brains allow us to understand the rules of the universe, and more importantly, they allow us to exploit them. The emergence of consciousness on this planet did not just lead to a creature that eats more food. It led to a creature that figured out how to extract concentrated order from the deep, hidden reserves of the Earth itself. The physical structure of our brains gave us the ability to conceive of fire. It gave us the ability to dig ancient, highly ordered carbon out of the ground and burn it, violently releasing hundreds of millions of years of stored solar energy into the atmosphere in a matter of decades. Our brains gave us the ability to split the atom, to harness the fundamental forces of reality, and to construct massive, sprawling, glowing cities that radiate heat into the freezing void of space. We are not just a biological engine of decay. Through the power of our conscious minds, we have become a planetary-scale engine of decay. We have weaponized our intelligence to strip mine the Earth of its order, shredding it through our industries, our technologies, and our bodies, converting it all into chaotic, disorganized heat at a rate that simple, unconscious biology could never possibly achieve. And the terrifying truth is that we do all of this simply because our brains demand it. The relentless, burning furnace inside the human skull requires constant fuel. It drives our hunger, it drives our ambition, and it drives our desperate, unyielding need to manipulate the environment around us.
we must sit with the immense, heavy gravity of this realization.
Our profound internal lives, the joy of discovery, the agonizing depths of grief, the quiet moments of deep, philosophical reflection, are physically manifested as localized electrical storms, burning through ordered chemistry and venting waste heat into a dying cosmos. The thoughts you are having at this exact moment are thermodynamic events. But as we peel back the layers of biology and chemistry, moving deeper into the physics of the mind, an even stranger, more profound question begins to emerge. It is one thing to acknowledge that pumping ions and firing electrical signals generates physical heat. That is standard, classical physics. But consciousness is not just the movement of ions. Consciousness is the processing of information. It is the storing of memories. It is the erasure of data. To truly understand the cost of awareness, we have to look past the biological machinery of the brain and step into a realm where the physical world and the abstract world violently collide. We must ask if the very concept of information itself carries a physical weight. We must follow the equations into a territory where physicists discovered that a thought is not just tied to thermodynamics, but that information and entropy are exactly the same thing. There is a quiet, sacred assumption that human beings have carried with us for the entirety of our recorded history. It is the belief that the inner world of the mind exists completely apart from the harsh, mechanical realities of the physical universe. We treat our thoughts as if they are weightless, immaterial ghosts. We believe that the quiet sanctuary of our subjective experience, the memories we hold, the silent words we speak to ourselves, the private landscapes of our imagination, is somehow exempt from the unyielding laws of thermodynamics that govern the stars and the stones. A rock falling from a cliff is a physical event subject to gravity. A fire burning in a hearth is a chemical event subject to entropy. But a thought, we assume, is simply a phantom, floating free from the heavy, grinding machinery of the cosmos. This illusion of the immaterial mind is deeply comforting. It allows us to believe that our consciousness sits above the physical fray, acting as a passive, weightless observer of a dying universe. But the scientific method does not respect our desire for comfort, and the universe harbors an absolute intolerance for anything that claims to exist outside of its rules. Everything must cast a shadow in the realm of physics. Everything that happens must pay the toll. And to understand the true, terrifying cost of human awareness, we must step away from biology for a moment and journey back to a theoretical crisis that threatened to completely dismantle the foundations of modern physics. We must confront a phantom that haunted the greatest minds of the 19th century. In the late 1800s, the Second Law of Thermodynamics was firmly established as the grim, unyielding ruler of physical reality. Physicists understood that entropy must always increase, that energy must always spread out, and that the universe was relentlessly marching toward a state of complete thermal stillness. It was a bleak, inescapable reality. But then, the brilliant Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell proposed a deeply unsettling thought experiment. He imagined a way to break the undefeated law, not with a massive, energy-burning machine, but with something far more insidious. He imagined breaking the law with simple, weightless knowledge. Maxwell asked us to imagine a perfectly sealed, insulated box divided directly down the middle by a solid wall. The box is filled with a gas, and both the left side and the right side are at the exact same temperature. The system has reached thermal equilibrium. It is entirely dead. According to the second law, absolutely nothing else can happen here. But Maxwell imagined a tiny, microscopic door in the center of the dividing wall. And sitting next to this door is a microscopic, highly intelligent entity that would soon become famous across the world of physics as Maxwell's demon. The demon has a very simple job.
It watches the molecules of gas bouncing around in both halves of the box. Even though the overall temperature of the gas is perfectly uniform, the individual molecules are not all moving at the exact same speed. Some are moving slightly faster, and some are moving slightly slower. Temperature is simply the average of these speeds. The demon observes a fast-moving molecule approaching the door from the left side. With a flick of its wrist, it opens the microscopic door, lets the fast molecule pass through to the right side, and immediately shuts it. A moment later, the demon spots a slow-moving molecule approaching from the right. It opens the door, lets the slow molecule pass to the left, and shuts it again. The demon continues this silent, invisible work for hours. It does not use any physical energy to push or pull the molecules. The door is perfectly frictionless, so opening and closing it requires zero work. All the demon is doing is observing the system and using its knowledge of the molecule's speeds to sort them. But look at the terrifying result of this sorting process. Because all the fast-moving molecules are being trapped on the right side of the box, the right side begins to heat up. Because all the slow-moving molecules are being trapped on the left side begins to freeze. Without expending a single joule of physical energy, the demon has taken a dead, chaotic system at thermal equilibrium and spontaneously created a highly ordered temperature gradient. It has decreased the entropy of the box. It has generated usable energy out of thin air. If Maxwell's demon could actually exist, the second law of thermodynamics would be instantly shattered. The unstoppable decay of the universe could be reversed. And the most profoundly disturbing part of the entire experiment was the mechanism the demon used to achieve this miracle. It didn't use heat, and it didn't use kinetic force. The demon defeated the ultimate law of physical reality by simply knowing information. For nearly a century, this phantom haunted the halls of theoretical physics. It was a gaping, agonizing paradox. How could mere information, something we considered to be a weightless, abstract concept, exert a physical force that could reverse the flow of entropy? If knowledge could cool down a box of gas, then our entire understanding of reality was fundamentally broken. We had assumed information was separate from the physical world. The demon suggested that information could grab the physical world by the throat and bend it to its will. The solution to this terrifying paradox did not come from a physicist looking through a telescope or smashing atoms in a collider. It came from an engineer trying to figure out how to send clearer telegraph signals over noisy copper wires. In the mid-20th century, a brilliant mathematician named Claude Shannon was working at Bell Laboratories, studying the fundamental limits of communication. He wanted to know exactly how much data could be squeezed through a telephone line before it became corrupted by static. To do this, Shannon had to do something no one had ever successfully done before. He had to take the abstract, philosophical concept of information and turn it into a hard, measurable, mathematical quantity. He stripped away the meaning of a message entirely. He didn't care if a telegram was a declaration of war, a love letter, or a list of groceries. He only cared about the predictability of the symbols used to construct it. Shannon realized that information is fundamentally a measure of surprise. It is a measure of how much uncertainty is resolved when you receive a message. If a friend calls you to tell you that the sun rose in the east this morning, you have received zero information because you already knew it would happen with absolute certainty. But if they call to tell you they just won the lottery, you have received a massive amount of information because they have suddenly resolved a state of high uncertainty into a single, highly specific reality. When Shannon wrote down the mathematical formula to quantify this uncertainty, formulating the exact equations for what he called information theory, he was struck by a profound and eerie revelation. His formula for the flow of information through a telephone wire looked exactly like the formula the Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann had written decades earlier to describe the flow of entropy in a steam engine. The mathematics of data and the mathematics of thermodynamics were identical. They were so identical, in fact, that Shannon decided to borrow the term from physics. He called his discovery information entropy. This was not just a clever coincidence of numbers. It was the first, terrifying hint that the universe does not distinguish between a physical object and the information required to describe it. Information is not a ghost. It is a fundamental property of the physical cosmos, woven into the fabric of reality just as deeply as mass, gravity, and energy. Armed with this radical new understanding, physicists returned to the sealed box to confront Maxwell's demon one last time. In 1961, a physicist named Rolf Landauer finally found the fatal flaw in the demon's seemingly perfect defiance of the universe. Landauer realized that previous generations of scientists had overlooked the most important physical component of the entire thought experiment. They had analyzed the gas, they had analyzed the frictionless door, and they had analyzed the wall. But they had completely forgotten to analyze the demon's brain. To sort the molecules successfully, the demon must observe a molecule, measure its speed, and store that information in its memory. The demon's mind cannot be an abstract, immaterial void. It must be a physical system. Whether it is a biological brain made of neurons or a mechanical computer made of silicon, the memory requires a physical substrate to record the data. The demon is essentially writing down a long list of ones and zeros to keep track of the fast and slow molecules. But any physical memory has a finite capacity. Eventually, the demon's ledger will fill up. It will run out of space to write down new measurements, to keep sorting the gas, to keep holding back the tide of thermal equilibrium. The demon has absolutely no choice. It must clear its memory. It must delete the old information to make room for the new. This is where Landauer made a discovery that permanently altered our understanding of the universe. He proved that the act of measuring the molecule does not cost any physical energy. The act of opening the frictionless door does not cost any energy. But the act of erasing the information from the demon's memory carries a strict, inescapable thermodynamic toll. When you erase a bit of data, you are taking a physical system that could be in one of two possible states, a 1 or a 0, and forcefully resetting it to a single, blank default state. You are taking a chaotic system of possible answers and squeezing it down into a single, highly ordered reality. You are mathematically compressing logical space. And the unyielding laws of physics dictate that the entropy you squeeze out of that logical space cannot just vanish into nothingness. It must be expelled into the physical environment. Landauer's principle states that the simple act of erasing a bit of information fundamentally, unavoidably dissipates a specific, minimum amount of physical heat. You cannot delete data for free. When the demon inevitably wipes its memory to continue its work, the physical heat generated by the erasure of that information bleeds out into the box. And when the mathematics were finally settled, physicists discovered a beautiful, devastating symmetry. The amount of heat the demon generates by forgetting is perfectly, exactly equal to the amount of heat it managed to sort out of the gas in the first place. The demon cannot cheat the universe. The effort of processing and discarding information produces the exact amount of entropy required to satisfy the second law of thermodynamics. The physical law holds firm, but it holds firm because information is physical. This brings us back from the abstract world of Victorian thought experiments to the damp, heavy reality of the human skull. If Landauer's principle applies to a theoretical demon and a silicon microchip, it absolutely applies to the biological architecture of the human mind. Our brains are the most dense, hyperactive information processing engines on the planet. And to understand the thermodynamic weight of our own existence, we must look at how we actually navigate the world. Your subjective experience of reality feels smooth, continuous, and highly detailed. But this is a masterful illusion. At every single second of your waking life, your sensory organs are being relentlessly bombarded by a blinding, deafening hurricane of raw data. Millions of photons are striking your retinas, Complex sound waves are vibrating your eardrums. Chemical signatures are washing over your olfactory receptors. Your nervous system is flooded with gigabytes of raw, unstructured information every fraction of a second. If your brain attempted to hold on to all of this data, your physical memory capacity would be overwhelmed in a matter of moments. To function, to survive, and to simply be aware of your surroundings, your brain must perform an act of continuous, aggressive filtration. It must identify the microscopic fraction of data that is actually useful. The sound of a voice, the shape of a predator, the meaning of a word, and it must ruthlessly, instantly discard the rest. Consciousness is not primarily a process of remembering. Consciousness is overwhelmingly a process of forgetting. To form a single, coherent thought out of the chaos of your sensory environment, your brain must constantly overwrite its own short-term ledgers. It must erase the background noise. It must delete the irrelevant visual details. It must clear the memory buffers to make room for the next second of reality. The human mind is locked in a frantic, exhausting cycle of measuring the world and immediately wiping the slate clean. And because of Landauer's principle, we know exactly what this constant erasure means in the cold, objective language of physics. Every time you discard a piece of sensory data, you are compressing logical space. Every time you forget a passing face in a crowded street, you are erasing a bit of information from a physical substrate. Every time your brain filters out the hum of an air conditioner so you can focus on reading a sentence, you are performing a thermodynamic transaction. And every single one of those microscopic erasures releases a tiny, unavoidable pulse of heat into the universe. The profound, unsettling truth is that your inner life is not a sanctuary. The quiet, private landscape of your mind is actively venting exhaust into the cosmos. The weight of a thought is not zero. Thinking, remembering, and forgetting are not just abstract mental concepts. They are strict, irreversible thermodynamic events. When you sit alone in a quiet room and close your eyes to reflect deeply on a memory, it feels like a purely internal, ethereal experience. It feels entirely detached from the mechanical world. But the universe feels you thinking. The universe registers the processing of your data. The immense concentration of order required to maintain your awareness is paid for by a massive, continuous release of physical entropy generated simply by the act of processing information. We are engines that run on data, and our exhaust is heat. The very act of being aware, of perceiving the world, of having a subjective, conscious experience, is fundamentally a mechanism that accelerates the degradation of reality. Your thoughts are heating up the universe. Your private joys, your quiet sorrows, and your deep, existential wonderings are actively pushing the cosmos closer to its ultimate, silent death. This realization completely shatters the barrier between the mind and the cosmos. We can no longer view ourselves as passive passengers riding on a decaying world. We are not just observing the flow of entropy. We are the flow of entropy. The human brain is a machine designed to process the information of the universe, and by processing that information, it ensures the universe will eventually reach its end. We are forced to confront a reality where biology, thermodynamics, and information theory converge into a single, terrifying architecture. If the simple act of filtering data generates physical heat, we must look at what happens when human consciousness is unleashed upon the macroscopic world. We must examine how this localized engine of thought scales up to encompass an entire planet, transforming our species from a quiet biological observer into the ultimate accelerator of cosmic chaos. When a single thought crosses your mind, a microscopic pulse of heat radiates outward from your skull, a tiny thermodynamic toll paid to the universe in exchange for a moment of awareness. We have seen how the immense, staggering complexity of the human brain demands a relentless flow of high-quality energy,
and how the simple, unavoidable act of processing information forces the mind to constantly erase data, generating physical entropy at a remarkable rate. But a single human being, wandering alone through a vast wilderness, is still just a localized, fragile event. The heat generated by one conscious mind is instantly swallowed by the overwhelming cold of the surrounding environment. To truly understand the terrifying role that consciousness plays in the grand architecture of the cosmos, we cannot look at a single brain in isolation. We must zoom out. We must watch what happens when billions of these highly ordered, deeply hungry information processing engines begin to network together. We must look at the macro scale of human civilization. When we observe the rest of the biological world, we see engines of entropy that are strictly limited by their own biology. A predator on the savannah is an incredibly efficient machine for breaking down the complex proteins of its prey and radiating that energy as heat. But the predator is bound by the brutal, unforgiving mathematics of the food web. It only consumes what its stomach can hold. It only hunts when it is hungry. When its immediate biological needs are met, it rests. The unconscious animal exists in a state of thermodynamic equilibrium with its ecosystem. It is a steady, slow-burning candle in the dark, restricted entirely by the carrying capacity of its environment. Consciousness, however, breaks this equilibrium entirely. The human mind possesses a unique, devastating capability that separates it from every other biological engine on the planet. We possess imagination. We can conceptualize a future that does not yet exist, and we can experience abstract desires that extend far beyond our immediate physical needs for survival. We do not just feel hunger in our stomachs, we feel hunger in our minds. We desire comfort. We desire security, novelty, speed, and power. And because our brains are fundamentally machines that process information and demand physical action, these abstract desires inevitably spill out of our skulls and violently reshape the physical world. Because we are conscious, we do not just consume food. We consume the planet. Think about the profound thermodynamic shift that occurred when our ancestors transitioned from foraging to farming. An unconscious animal wanders through a forest, eating the fruit that naturally falls to the ground, leaving the structure of the forest intact. A conscious mind looks at the exact same forest, calculates the potential energy locked in the wood, and cuts the entire system down. We burned the ancient trees to clear the soil. We redirected the natural flow of rivers. We took the wild, chaotic diversity of the biosphere and violently forced it into highly ordered, highly concentrated grids of agriculture. We did this to feed the relentless metabolic furnace of our growing brains and our expanding populations. But in the process of creating this localized agricultural order, we vastly accelerated the global degradation of the environment. We turned diverse, complex ecosystems into simplified engines for human caloric intake. For thousands of years, this acceleration was steady, but it was ultimately limited by the physical strength of human and animal muscle. We were essentially burning through the surface-level energy of the Earth, dissipating the daily allowance of solar radiation that hit the crops and the trees. We were a powerful force, but we were still playing by the rules of the surface world. But then, the human mind reached a critical threshold of understanding. We began to unravel the deep, hidden mechanics of reality. We looked beneath the soil. We discovered the buried reserves. Deep beneath the crust of the earth, sealed away in dark, pressurized geological vaults, lay hundreds of millions of years of ancient sunlight. Coal, oil, and natural gas are essentially massive, highly ordered chemical batteries. They are the compressed, carbon-rich remains of primeval forests and ancient oceans, representing a staggering accumulation of low-entropy energy that had been safely sequestered away from the chaotic surface of the planet. Left to the slow, blind geological processes of the Earth, this concentrated order might have remained safely locked underground for billions of years, slowly bleeding its heat into the surrounding rocks at a glacial, almost imperceptible pace. But the universe found a shortcut. It generated a conscious species capable of peering into the dark and recognizing the value of those chemical bonds. In the blink of a cosmic eye, representing a mere 2 centuries of human industry, we sank massive steel shafts into the crust. We pumped the ancient oceans of oil to the surface. We dug up the subterranean forests of coal, and we set it all on fire. We took hundreds of millions of years of carefully hoarded, low-entropy cosmic order and violently shredded it into high-entropy, disorganized heat, venting it directly into the thin atmosphere. The Industrial Revolution was not just a historical or economic event. It was a massive, planetary-scale thermodynamic explosion. It was the moment human consciousness truly took the reins, transforming from a highly active biological participant in the ecosystem into an unstoppable geological force of nature. And we did not stop there. The hunger of the conscious mind is absolute, and its capacity to unlock the secrets of the universe is terrifying. As we burned through the ancient carbon, our physicists probed even deeper into the fundamental architecture of matter. We looked past the chemical bonds of molecules and stared directly into the nucleus of the atom. We discovered the strong nuclear force, the immense, terrifying energy that binds the very fabric of the universe together. With the splitting of the uranium atom, we unlocked a level of energy dissipation that no unconscious biological process could ever hope to achieve. We harnessed the power of dying stars, built massive, highly engineered reactors, and used the foundational energy of reality itself to boil water and spin turbines, all to keep the lights on in our sprawling, restless civilization. Look at our modern cities from the cold, objective vacuum of space. To the human eye, they are breathtaking monuments to our ingenuity. They are vast, beautiful grids of glowing light pushing back against the dark of the night. But through the lens of thermodynamics, they are something entirely different. A city is a massive, highly efficient radiator. It is a concentrated node of extreme energy dissipation. We take the raw, ordered materials of the earth, the iron, the silica, the copper, and the carbon, and we run them through the blazing furnace of human industry to build skyscrapers, highways, and global electrical grids. Every single brick laid, every pane of glass forged, and every mile of asphalt poured requires a massive intake of usable energy and results in a massive exhaust of useless heat. We are paving the surface of the world to accelerate the flow of entropy. And today, we are embarking on the most energy-intensive project in the history of our species. We are attempting to build artificial replicas of our own minds. The creation of artificial intelligence is the ultimate, undeniable testament to the thermodynamic cost of processing information. To train a massive neural network, to force a machine made of silicon and rare earth metals to understand the complex, shifting patterns of human speech, logic, and art requires a staggering amount of physical infrastructure. We are building sprawling, windowless server farms that stretch across hundreds of acres of land. Inside these massive, fortified structures, millions of processors are running simultaneously, performing trillions of calculations every single second. We must recall the unforgiving reality of the physics of information. The simple act of processing data, of writing and erasing bits of information from a physical substrate, fundamentally generates heat. There is no such thing as a weightless computation.
Now, multiply that microscopic burst of heat by the unimaginable volume of data flowing through the global internet and into these artificial minds every fraction of a millisecond. We are processing, sorting, and erasing information on a scale that defies human comprehension. The physical exhaust of this digital civilization is very real, and it is immense. These server farms require entire dedicated power plants just to keep them running. They require massive, industrial-scale cooling systems, pulling millions of gallons of fresh water from local rivers and aquifers, just to prevent the silicon brains from melting down under the sheer, crushing weight of their own thermodynamic waste. We are literally pouring rivers of water and gigawatts of electricity into the task of processing abstract information. We are burning the physical world to power a virtual one. This relentless drive to compute, to build, to burn, and to consume is deeply hardwired into our biology. It is not a flaw in our programming. It is the programming.
We often look at the destructive consequences of human civilization: the shifting climate, the depleted oceans, the leveled forests, and the mountains stripped of their ores, and we frame them purely as moral failures. We view ourselves as a noble species that has tragically lost its way, a group of intelligent caretakers who have abandoned our sacred responsibility to protect the garden of the earth. But the cold equations of thermodynamics do not deal in human morality. The universe does not judge the clearing of a forest any more than it judges the violent explosion of a supernova. Both are simply mechanisms of energy dispersal. From the objective, unfeeling viewpoint of the cosmos, human civilization is functioning exactly as it was designed to function. Our insatiable curiosity, our boundless ambition, and our desperate, relentless need to conquer the environment are the exact traits that make us such incredibly efficient engines of decay. When a brilliant scientist works late into the night, burning calories and electricity to solve a complex equation, they are generating entropy. When an artist paints a masterpiece, harvesting materials to rearrange chemical pigments on a canvas, they are generating entropy. When an entire society mobilizes to build a global communication network, launching rockets into orbit to weave a web of satellites, they are actively accelerating the fundamental aging process of the universe. Every towering achievement of human intellect, every beautiful expression of our conscious experience, and every technological marvel we construct carries a hidden, inescapable physical cost. We are paying for our awareness by draining the battery of the cosmos. We are trading the highly ordered structure of the Earth for the fleeting, brilliant spark of human thought. This brings us to a profound, almost terrifying conclusion about the fundamental nature of our existence. We have spent centuries looking up at the stars, wondering why the universe went to the immense trouble of creating conscious life. We have assumed, driven by our own deep-seated arrogance, that we are the universe's way of thinking, its way of experiencing its own beauty and grandeur. We believed we were the absolute pinnacle of cosmic evolution, a rare and precious jewel shining in the dark. But if the absolute, underlying goal of physical reality is to reach a state of maximum entropy as fast as mathematically possible, then the emergence of consciousness makes perfect, chilling sense. Think about a massive, highly ordered asteroid floating in the freezing depths of the outer solar system. If left completely alone, that asteroid will slowly, steadily radiate its meager internal heat into the vacuum. Its radioactive elements will decay at a glacial pace. Over a time span of trillions of years, it will eventually crumble into a disorganized cloud of dust, finally achieving perfect thermal equilibrium with the void. Trillions of years is a very long time for the universe to wait for a return on a thermodynamic investment.
The universe could rely on dead rocks releasing heat slowly over uncounted eons. Or it could allow the blind, churning laws of chemistry and physics to randomly generate a conscious mind. A conscious mind will not just sit in the dark and slowly decay. A conscious mind will wake up. It will look around. It will feel the sharp, biting pain of the cold, and it will figure out how to build a fire. It will look at that same asteroid, realize that the heavy metals inside can be used to build a starship or a sprawling orbital habitat, and it will strip mine the entire rock in a matter of centuries. It will take an object that would have taken trillions of years to reach maximum entropy, break it apart, process it through the furnace of industry, and obliterate its ordered structure in the blink of a cosmic eye. We are not the masters of reality, nor are we its passive, peaceful observers. We are the most aggressive, highly optimized mechanism the universe has ever produced for achieving its own end. We are the ultimate accelerator, the staggering complexity of the human brain, the breathtaking beauty of our art, and the sprawling, glowing majesty of our technological civilization are not a valiant rebellion against the dying of the light. They are the roaring flames of a universe that is desperately, relentlessly trying to burn itself out. We are the universe's most efficient tool for self-destruction. When you stare into the cold, unblinking eye of the cosmos, armed only with the rigid equations of thermodynamics, a profound and terrifying silence stares back. We have journeyed through the mechanical reality of the universe. We have dismantled the comforting, poetic illusion that biological life is a heroic rebellion against the dark. We have seen the human brain for what it truly is, a blazing, demanding furnace of metabolic activity, relentlessly consuming ordered energy and vomiting waste heat into the void. We have followed the logic of information theory to its absolute, chilling conclusion, realizing that the very act of thinking, the simple process of filtering out the noise of the world to form a coherent memory, is fundamentally an act of universal degradation. The physics are inescapable. We are the ultimate accelerator. We are the universe's most efficient tool for tearing itself apart. This realization carries a crushing, almost suffocating existential weight. It threatens to pull the rug out from under everything we hold sacred. Think about the most profound moments of your life. Think about the quiet, agonizing depth of falling in love. Think about the swelling in your chest when you listen to a masterful piece of music, or the fierce, protective instinct a parent feels for their child. For our entire history, we have placed these experiences on an untouchable pedestal. We have called them the soul. We have believed that these subjective feelings elevate us above the crude, grinding machinery of dead matter. We have told ourselves that our capacity for love, our desperate search for truth, and our creation of art make us the intended, meaningful protagonists of reality. But the dissipation hypothesis strips away this protective layer of poetry. It demands that we look at our deepest loves and our greatest artistic achievements not as spiritual triumphs, but as literal, mechanical byproducts. When you feel a surge of affection, you are experiencing a cascade of neurotransmitters, a highly ordered chemical reaction that is actively destroying molecular bonds and radiating disorganized infrared heat. When a musician composes a symphony, they are burning massive amounts of glucose, forcing millions of neurons to fire in rapid succession, generating entropy simply to process the mathematical patterns of sound. Our most profound self-awareness, our philosophy, and our science, all of it is just the exhaust of a biological machine running at maximum capacity to satisfy a blind physical law. If every tear you have ever shed, every laugh that has escaped your lungs, and every quiet moment of awe you have felt beneath a starry sky is nothing more than a thermodynamic trick designed to cool down the universe a fraction of a second faster, then the inevitable question rises up from the dark. Does any of it matter? If we are merely temporary chemical fires burning in a vacuum, completely beholden to the mindless objective of increasing global disorder, it is incredibly easy to fall into a state of absolute, paralyzing nihilism. The universe does not care about your joy. It does not care about your suffering. It only cares about the rate at which you distribute your internal energy into the surrounding environment. In the grand, 13.8 billion year timeline of the cosmos, human civilization is less than a microscopic flash. We are a sudden, violent spark of localized order that will burn itself out, having done nothing but accelerate the great unraveling. When the final stars die, and the universe reaches the freezing, static silence of perfect equilibrium, there will be no record of our existence. There will be no memory of our art, our wars, or our loves. The cold mathematics suggests that we are fundamentally meaningless. We are a thermodynamic glitch, a fleeting biological tool that will be discarded the moment its job is done. It is a heavy, isolating place to stand, at the bottom of this conceptual abyss. But the scientific method does not just tear down our illusions. If we are brave enough to keep looking, to keep interrogating the reality we inhabit, science also provides the tools to build something far more resilient in their place. We do not have to surrender to the cold, dead mechanical nature of the cosmos. We can accept the absolute truth of our physical existence without sacrificing the value of our subjective experience. We just have to change our perspective. We have to pivot away from the terrifying scale of the infinite and focus entirely on the profound, staggering beauty of the glitch itself. Yes, we are engines of decay. The physics are sound, and the math is unforgiving. We consume, we dissipate, and we push the universe closer to its inevitable heat death. But we are not just blind rocks passively radiating warmth into the vacuum. We are not simple, unconscious bacteria thoughtlessly multiplying in the dark. We are aware engines. Pause for a moment and truly consider the sheer, mind-bending absurdity of that fact. For billions of years, the universe was entirely blind. It was a sprawling, violently expanding theater of raw energy and dead matter. Massive clouds of hydrogen collapsed into roaring stars. Supernovae exploded, forging the heavy elements of iron, carbon, and oxygen in their dying fires. Entire galaxies collided and merged in the absolute silence of the deep void. But there was no one there to see it. There was no one there to feel it. The universe was playing out a magnificent, complex physical drama, but the theater was entirely empty. The cosmos existed, but it did not know it existed. And then, through the blind, chaotic churning of thermodynamics, the universe accidentally forged a mirror. On a tiny, wet rock orbiting an unremarkable star, the endless drive to dissipate energy forced matter to organize into increasingly complex structures. The structures built sensory organs. They built nervous systems. They built the 86 billion neurons of the human cerebral cortex. The universe literally grew eyes, and it opened them. Through us, the cosmos woke up. We are not separate from the universe, standing outside of it and looking in. We are the universe. We are localized, temporary collections of ancient cosmic dust that have somehow acquired the ability to think. When you look through a telescope at the swirling, majestic arms of a distant galaxy, you are the universe looking at itself. When you study the complex equations of quantum mechanics, you are the universe attempting to decode its own operating system. This is a phenomenon of such staggering, improbable beauty that it fundamentally changes the nature of reality. Think about the physical nature of the world around you. In the strict, objective reality of physics, the universe contains no color. It contains no sound. It contains no inherent beauty. There is only a storm of electromagnetic radiation of varying wavelengths and the mechanical vibration of molecules in the air. A sunset is not inherently beautiful, it is just atmospheric scattering of light. A symphony is not inherently moving, it is just localized variations in air pressure. But when those wavelengths of light hit the retina of a human eye, and when those variations in air pressure strike a human eardrum, the aware engine goes to work. The conscious mind translates the cold, dead data of the physical universe into the vivid, breathtaking reality of human experience. We render the colors, we compose the music, we synthesize the beauty. The universe provides the raw, chaotic mechanics, but consciousness is the mechanism that actually turns it into something meaningful. Without the conscious mind, the universe is just a dark, silent room filled with moving parts. The laws of physics may be cold and unfeeling, but they inadvertently gave birth to a mechanism that can actually comprehend the laws of physics. They created a being that can experience awe. The universe generated a temporary pocket of extreme order that is capable of feeling terror at its own eventual demise and capable of finding comfort in the presence of others facing the exact same fate. If consciousness is just a thermodynamic byproduct, then it is the most magnificent, awe-inspiring byproduct that matter has ever produced. The fact that the blind pursuit of entropy resulted in the soaring architecture of a cathedral, the haunting melody of a cello, and the quiet, fierce love between two human beings is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to be absolutely astounded. It means that meaning is not something handed down from on high by a divine architect, and it is not a fundamental property of the physical vacuum. Meaning is an emergent property. It is something that only we can create. Meaning is a localized phenomenon. It requires an observer. It requires a mind. Before consciousness emerged, the concept of meaning did not exist anywhere in the cosmos. And when the last conscious mind eventually fades into the dark, the concept of meaning will vanish with it. But while we are here, while the engine is running and the mind is firing, the meaning we generate is entirely real. It is as real as gravity. It is as real as thermodynamics. It is brought into physical existence by the very act of our awareness. To understand how something temporary and mechanical can hold infinite value, think of a fire burning in the heart of a freezing, dark winter night. From the strict perspective of a physicist, the fire is nothing more than a chemical reaction. It is a rapid oxidation process. The wood is being broken down, its complex cellulose molecules are being violently shattered, and the stored solar energy within those bonds is being released as disorganized heat and light. The fire is a perfect engine of entropy. It exists only to destroy the structure of the wood and accelerate the decay of the system. But if you are a human being standing in the freezing dark, you do not care about the physical chemistry of the oxidation process. You care about the warmth. You care about the light that pushes back the shadows and keeps the terrors of the night at bay. You care about the safety it provides and the way the dancing flames draw people together to share stories, to find comfort in one another's presence, and to stave off the crushing isolation of the cold. The fire is just a thermodynamic reaction, yes, but it is the only source of warmth in the dark, and its value does not come from its permanence. In fact, if the fire burned forever, if it was an infinite and unbreakable law of nature, we would likely ignore it. We would take it for granted, just as we take the constant pull of gravity for granted. The fire is precious precisely because it requires fuel. It is precious because it is hungry, because it is fragile, and because we know, with absolute certainty, that it will eventually burn itself out and leave nothing but cold, grey ash. The human mind is that fire. Our consciousness is a fleeting, highly ordered, incredibly fragile thermodynamic reaction burning against the endless backdrop of a freezing void. We are a temporary spark. We are a highly localized event that requires constant maintenance, constant fuel, and constant effort just to keep from collapsing back into the dark. The terrifying realization that we are a byproduct of entropy does not rob our lives of meaning. It actually clarifies exactly why our lives are so profoundly valuable. Because our existence is not guaranteed. It is not permanent. It is a wildly improbable, temporary state of extreme order. The fact that you can experience the world at all is a thermodynamic miracle. Every single second you spend breathing, thinking, and feeling is a victory against the overwhelming statistical probability of non-existence. The universe wants you to be dust. The universe wants your atoms to be scattered and quiet. But right now, in this specific, fleeting window of cosmic time, you are defying the silence. You are a highly complex machine, built by a dying universe, capable of experiencing the devastating beauty of its own decay. When we reframe our existence in this light, the existential dread begins to dissolve, replaced by a grounded, clear-eyed sense of gratitude. We do not need the universe to care about us in order for our lives to matter. We do not need our art, our civilizations, or our memories to last forever to make them valuable. The sheer act of experiencing them in the present moment is enough. The love you feel for another human being is a chemical reaction that increases the entropy of the universe.
But that does not make the love fake. It makes the love a physical, tangible force in the cosmos. It means that your affection is literally altering the physical state of reality. The art you create, the kindness you show to a stranger, the quiet moments you spend simply sitting and listening to the wind. These are all thermodynamic events. They are the mechanisms by which the universe is processing its own existence. We are the universe's way of feeling the warmth of the fire. We can accept the cold mechanics of reality without becoming cold ourselves. We can stare into the relentless, unyielding march of the second law of thermodynamics and acknowledge our role as the ultimate accelerators of chaos. But we can also recognize that this mechanical drive is exactly what gave us the capacity for wonder. The universe is a vast, uncaring machine. It is winding down. It is heading toward a state of absolute thermal stillness where nothing will ever happen again. But before the machine stops, before the final stars burn out and the long, dark quiet takes over, the machine managed to generate a glitch. A beautiful, conscious, feeling glitch. A glitch that can look back at the gears and the cogs, understand how they work, and find profound beauty in the very process of its own unmaking. We are not the masters of the cosmos, nor are we its intended purpose. We are the brief, brilliant flash of light generated by a universe that is burning itself away. And that fleeting, radiant awareness is the most precious phenomenon in the entirety of existence. Because for a few brief moments in the dark, the universe knows that it is beautiful. To truly comprehend the nature of our existence, and to fully grasp the heavy, mechanical reality of the consciousness we carry inside our own skulls, we must be willing to look past the horizon of our own brief lives. We must step outside the comforting familiarity of human history, leaving behind the scale of centuries and millennia, and cast our minds forward into the deep, unimaginable future. The universe you and I inhabit today is a vibrant, dynamic place. It is a sprawling theatre filled with the brilliant light of burning stars, the violent collisions of massive galaxies, and the restless, pulsing energy of biological life. But this era of light and activity is not the permanent state of the cosmos. It is a fleeting, temporary phase. The second law of thermodynamics,
The unyielding rule that demands the spreading of energy and the increase of disorder is relentlessly driving the massive machinery of reality toward a final, inescapable destination. We have spent this journey exploring how the intricate architecture of the human mind might simply be a highly efficient engine for accelerating this decay. We have seen how our thoughts, our industries, and our civilizations act as violent catalysts for entropy. Now, we must travel to the very end of that process. We must look at the silent world our conscious minds are helping to build. The death of the universe will not be a sudden, violent catastrophe. It will not be a singular explosion that wipes the slate clean, and it will not be a sudden collapse into immediate darkness. It will be a slow, agonizing fade. It will be a gradual, relentless unraveling of structure, matter, and energy that will play out over timescales so vast that the human mind completely breaks down trying to grasp them. We are forced to abandon our everyday understanding of time and enter the realm of deep, cosmic time, where millions of years pass like seconds, and the slow grinding of thermodynamics dictates the fate of everything that has ever existed. Right now, we live in what astrophysicists call the stelliferous era, the age of stars. The night sky is painted with billions of immense nuclear furnaces, fusing hydrogen in their dense cores and radiating vital heat into the freezing vacuum of space. But the supply of usable hydrogen in the cosmos is strictly finite. As the millions of years turn into billions, and the billions stretch into trillions, the rate of new star formation will begin to dramatically slow down. The massive, brilliant blue stars, the ones that burn with the greatest intensity and illuminate the spiral arms of our galaxy, will be the first to exhaust their fuel. They will detonate in spectacular supernovae, leaving behind dense, dead remnants, and their light will be extinguished forever. The smaller, cooler red dwarfs will hoard their fuel for much longer, burning dimly and quietly for trillions of years. But eventually, even the most frugal of these ancient stars will run out of resources. The nuclear fires will choke. They will quietly fade away, shrinking into cold, dense spheres of degenerate matter known as black dwarfs. One by one, the lights across the universe will go out. The galaxies, once magnificent, swirling islands of illumination, will slowly dissolve into absolute darkness. But the story of cosmic decay does not end with the death of the last stars. It is only entering a new, much longer, and much darker chapter. Once the final star has cooled, the universe will be plunged into an era dominated entirely by the silent remnants of the past. It will be a sprawling, expanding graveyard of black dwarfs, rapidly spinning neutron stars, and the towering, invisible titans of the cosmos, the black holes. For an incomprehensible span of time, these dead objects will drift through a pitch-black void that is constantly being stretched and pulled apart by the mysterious force of dark energy. Occasionally, the blind, unfeeling forces of gravity will draw these dead remnants together in violent, silent collisions, sending ripples of gravitational waves out into the dark. But even these incredibly dense structures are not immune to the relentless, creeping authority of the second law of thermodynamics. The atoms that make up the dead stars, the protons and neutrons that form the very bedrock of physical matter, are suspected by theoretical physicists to be inherently unstable over extreme timescales. Eventually, the fundamental building blocks of matter itself will begin to decay. The cold, solid spheres of the black dwarfs and the dense shells of the neutron stars will slowly, almost imperceptibly, dissolve. They will break down into a faint mist of subatomic particles and low-energy radiation, spreading out into the ever-expanding vacuum of space. With the solid, tactile matter of the universe dissolved,
The only structures left standing in the vast emptiness will be the black holes. These are objects of such extreme mass and gravitational power that they have essentially severed themselves from the normal fabric of space-time. They are the ultimate hoarders of cosmic energy, trapping everything that crosses their event horizons and refusing to let it go. But as the brilliant physicist Stephen Hawking demonstrated, even the mighty black holes are not eternal. They, too, must eventually bow to the laws of entropy. The rules of quantum mechanics dictate that empty space is never truly empty. It is a boiling, chaotic foam of virtual particles constantly popping into and out of existence. When this quantum fluctuation occurs right on the very edge of a black hole's event horizon, the extreme gravitational gradient can tear the particle pairs apart. One particle falls into the abyss, and the other escapes into the surrounding space. This escaping particle carries a minuscule, almost unmeasurable amount of mass and energy away from the black hole. This process, known as Hawking radiation, is agonizingly, painfully slow. For a supermassive black hole resting at the center of a dead galaxy, it would take a 1 followed by 100 zeros years to fully evaporate. It is a timescale that renders the entire history of the Earth, the Sun, and human civilization mathematically indistinguishable from zero. It is a number so large that if you were to write a 0 on every single atom in the universe, you would run out of atoms before you could write the number down. But the mathematics of thermodynamics are infinitely patient. Over these unimaginable, sweeping eons, the black holes will slowly, steadily leak their mass back into the dark universe. As they shrink, the rate of their evaporation will accelerate, until finally they detonate in a brief, brilliant flash of radiation and then vanish completely. When the last supermassive black hole finishes its slow evaporation, the universe will cross a terrifying, irreversible threshold. The physical cosmos will be entirely devoid of structure. There will be no stars. There will be no planets. There will be no atoms, no molecules, and no solid matter of any kind. There will be no gravity wells to pull things together, and no light to illuminate the dark. The universe will have finally reached its ultimate state. It will have achieved the heat death. The term heat death is a relic of 19th century physics, and it can be slightly misleading because it implies a universe that is burning or sweltering. In reality, the heat death is a state of absolute, profound, and unending cold. It is the specific moment when the universe finally achieves perfect thermal equilibrium. The total energy of the cosmos has not been destroyed, because energy cannot be destroyed. But it has been completely, flawlessly, and evenly distributed across an infinitely large, ever-expanding volume of space. Imagine a vast, limitless ocean without a single ripple. There are no high waves crashing on a shore, and there are no deep troughs. The surface is perfectly, terrifyingly flat, stretching out into infinity in every direction. This is the ultimate, final victory of entropy. The universe will consist of nothing but a highly dilute soup of photons and subatomic particles, drifting aimlessly through the dark, separated by distances so incomprehensibly vast that they will never interact with one another. The temperature of the cosmos will drop to a fraction of a degree above absolute zero, flattening out until there are no hot spots and no cold spots left anywhere in existence. In this state of perfect equilibrium, the most profound casualty is not just the physical structure of matter. The ultimate casualty is time itself. Time, as we understand and experience it, is fundamentally tied to the concept of change. We measure the passage of time by observing the universe moving from one state to another. We watch a clock tick. We watch a plant grow from a seed. We watch a star burn through its fuel. All of these processes are driven by the flow of energy from a state of low entropy to a state of high entropy.
Time has a direction because energy has a direction. But in a universe at perfect thermal equilibrium, there are no energy gradients left. Heat cannot flow because there is nowhere colder for it to flow to. Without the movement of energy, absolutely no physical work can be done. Nothing can happen. The universe becomes a static, unchanging photograph. If you were to take a snapshot of the cosmos in the heat death and then wait 1 trillion years to take another snapshot, the two images would be completely identical. Because nothing changes, the concept of a past and a future completely dissolves. The arrow of time, which has driven the universe relentlessly forward since the moment of the Big Bang, finally loses its momentum, stalls, and stops completely. And it is here, in this frozen, unchanging, timeless wasteland, that we must confront the final, absolute physical limit of consciousness. Throughout this journey, we have explored the mechanical, physical reality of the human mind. We have stripped away the poetic illusions and seen that consciousness is not an ethereal ghost floating above the laws of physics. It is a highly active, incredibly demanding thermodynamic process. To hold a memory, your brain must maintain a complex, highly ordered physical state against the chaotic pressure of the environment. To form a new thought, your neurons must pump ions across biological membranes, building and releasing electrical tension. To filter the overwhelming noise of reality and make sense of the world, your mind must continuously erase irrelevant information, venting physical heat into the surrounding air in strict accordance with the laws of information entropy. Thinking is an industrial process. It requires a steep energy gradient to function. It requires a massive source of low-entropy fuel, like the complex chemical bonds in the food we eat, which are ultimately derived from the concentrated nuclear fire of our local star. And, just as importantly, it requires a cold environment to dump the resulting waste heat into. The machinery of awareness operates entirely on the difference between the hot and the cold. But in the heat death of the universe, there is no difference. There are no energy gradients left to exploit. There is no concentrated fuel to consume, and there is nowhere to dump waste heat, because the ambient temperature of the entire universe is exactly uniform. In this bleak environment, a biological brain obviously cannot exist, because the chemical bonds that hold it together would have decayed trillions of years prior. But even if we expand our imagination to the absolute limits of science fiction, even if we imagine a consciousness completely untethered from wet biology, a sprawling artificial intelligence built from the most resilient fundamental particles, or a mind made of pure, structured energy, it still cannot escape the iron grip of thermodynamics. To process a single bit of information, to flip a logical state from a 0 to a 1, requires the physical transfer of energy. In a state of perfect equilibrium, energy cannot transfer. To erase a bit of information to make room for a new thought requires the release of physical heat. In a state of perfect equilibrium, the environment cannot accept any more heat without creating an impossible thermodynamic imbalance. Therefore, when the universe reaches the heat death, the processing of information becomes physically impossible. The engine of the mind requires a difference in energy to turn its gears. When that difference is finally erased, the engine must halt. The last thought ever processed in the cosmos, whether it belongs to a highly advanced biological entity at the end of time, or a sprawling, planetary-scale machine waiting in the dark, will flicker and die simply because the fundamental laws of physics will no longer permit the movement of data. The universe will lose the ability to observe itself. It will forget that it ever existed, slipping into an eternal, dreamless sleep. This is the deeply unsettling, ultimate consequence of the dissipation hypothesis. If consciousness is simply a byproduct of entropy, a highly efficient thermodynamic tool generated by the universe to accelerate its own decay, then consciousness is entirely dependent on the universe being completely out of balance. We exist only in the temporary, violent tension between the highly ordered state of the Big Bang and the chaotic, flatlined state of the heat death. We are the sparks flying off the cosmic grinding wheel. When the grinding finally stops, the sparks must inevitably fade into the dark. It is incredibly easy to look at this vast, sweeping timeline and feel entirely crushed by the sheer weight of it. The incomprehensible scale of the universe's death threatens to render our entire existence seemingly meaningless. If everything we have ever built, everything we have ever loved, and everything we have ever learned is destined to be swallowed by a frozen, eternal silence, why do we strive? Why do we suffer? Why do we continue to build, to create art, and to ask questions about our place in the dark? The answer lies not in looking forward to the freezing silence of the end, but in looking closely at the astonishing, improbable reality of the present moment. We exist in a universe that is falling apart, but it has not fallen apart yet. The cosmic spring is still unwinding. The stars are still burning bright in the vacuum. The energy is still flowing. And in this incredibly narrow, fleeting window of cosmic time, the blind, unfeeling laws of physics accidentally created a mechanism that can actually perceive the devastating beauty of the fall. The universe is a mechanical system driven by the mindless, relentless mathematics of entropy. But those very mathematics gave rise to chemistry, and chemistry gave rise to biology, and biology gave rise to a mind that can look up at the night sky and weep at the sheer majesty of it all. We are the thermodynamic glitch. We are the brief, brilliant moment where the universe woke up, looked at its own hands, and realized it was alive. You are a highly structured, localized pocket of extreme order, swimming bravely against the cosmic tide of chaos. Your brain is burning calories, your neurons are firing in complex rhythmic patterns, and your consciousness is generating heat, all simply so you can comprehend the very physical laws that will one day dismantle you. This is not a tragedy. It is the most profound, staggering miracle in the known universe. The meaning of our existence is not found in permanence. It is not found in lasting forever. It is found in the simple, breathtaking fact that we are here at all. We are the waking universe. We are the cosmos experiencing its own complexity, its own heartbreak, and its own beauty before the long night sets in. We exist in the brief, beautiful window where the universe is out of balance, allowing us to think, wonder, and ask these questions. Good night, and see you in the next video.